Colonel, with what has happened with Donald Trump in the aftermath of the SCO summit. Here is what he posted on the social truth just 3 hours ago. Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together. Donald Trump. How does he feel when you look at Donald Trump and his administration? How does he feel, in your opinion, right now?
Which one?
Donald, you, Colonel, I
Oh,
ask you.
well, I mean, good on Donald Trump, because I can almost assure him that aside from our possible use of nuclear weapons, that they will have a warm and prosperous future.
Yeah.
Sad to say, I can't assure Donald Trump that the country he currently represents will have such a future.
I think if that's the case, if the way that he's trying to picture for us, he feels about Russia and China in the hands of, or somehow closer to China. So what is he doing to avoid that? What is he doing to just improve the relationship between the United States and these countries, Larry?
Well, nothing. I mean, he's a petulant child. In your conversation with Alex Craner yesterday, and Alex, I think he's great. He's a friend, but I think he gives Donald Trump way too much benefit of the doubt that he's really understands what he's doing. I don't think he does, because this kind of comment is just so gratuitous, so unnecessary. What does it accomplish? Is this comment meant to have a closer relationship with Russia, India, and China? Just the opposite. He reminds his remarks reminds me of a teenager. Pick your boy or girl, doesn't matter, who's broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And now that boyfriend and girlfriend are going out with somebody else, and they're just, all they can do is issue catty comments. I was the best thing in your life, and now you're gonna go ahead and curse on both of you. That kind of thing. What does it accomplish? Nothing. But the entire, let's call it, ideological foundation for neocon policy towards China over the last 20 years has been predicated on keeping Russia and China apart, and using Russia as a battering ram, as a wedge, something, we can destroy Russia, we can break it up, but we're ultimately, the target is China. And maybe that it's more accurate to say it's been 10 years. But Trump's fallen into that trap. He is, instead of saying, hey, let's figure out a way that we can all work together. I mean, be genuinely the peace president. But that's not what he's doing. He is, basically throwing these cheap juvenile insults at these countries. And Putin's reaction to the previous truth, that's what, Trump calls them truths. The one where he said that they were all conspiring against the United States. Putin just said, that Trump, he's a joker. He was just, it's his attempt at humor. They just brushed it off.
Yeah, he said that they're conspiring. Yeah, go ahead, Colonel. Yeah.
I was just going to add, I agree with what Larry just said. Just add that he needed to include more people in that salutation. There were 10 countries there, and observers too, like Afghanistan. They're all in a better place. They are all in a better place than we are right now. And we are becoming rapidly in a worse and worse place. So you should have extended your congratulations, if you will, to all of those countries, from Kyrgyzstan to Pakistan to Mongolia and Afghanistan, who are aspirants, Belarusia, the whole panoply of SCO people.
It seems, Colonel, that it's much complicated than it seems, because you look at India. Do you think that the India agenda is somehow the, the policy toward India on the part of the Trump administration is somehow connected to the tariff policy, or it's all about the case of Ukraine? I don't feel that it's all about the case of Ukraine. It's How do you feel about it?
My personal view is that, and I have almost given up trying to crawl into Trump's head. I mean, it's just too confused. If I could crawl into it, I'd want out immediately. I'm sure of that. I think it's all about Russia. And I think he sees India as having been disloyal, if you will, because they will not break away from Russian oil, and they will not break away, I'm told now, even the Navy back again. The Navy was gravitating as slowly as it had to, because Delhi didn't like it too much, towards the U.S. Navy, because they prefer, frankly, sailing with the U.S. Navy in the Indian Ocean. They love the U.S. Navy in the Indian Ocean. At least that's what all the sailors I know tell me, whether they're Airedales or surface warriors or whatever. It's a very close relationship in a very difficult and huge ocean complex. Now they're even gravitating back to where they were before. And so Russia's stolen a march on us, if you will, with regard to India. And I think that makes Trump very angry.
Larry, it seems that the Trump administration is divided in different factions, and these factions are not helping each other. The communication between these factions is not that much good. Do you feel that, after all, is Donald Trump himself is behind one of the most important decisions going to Russia and China in the case of Ukraine?
That, your question presupposes that that Trump is actually thinking strategically. Now, I've got some friends that, and we disagree on this point. One of them thinks that actually Trump's, got a plan, and he's following the plan, and he knows what he's doing. I don't think he does. It's very much emotional. And you watch what he's, the other day he was talking about. On the one hand, he's criticizing Russia, India, and China, but then he's talking about, they're such great friends with me. They can't help but like, they can't help but like me. And part of it as well is just the ignorant things that Trump says that show no understanding of history. For example, with respect to India and Pakistan, Trump doesn't understand about the long relationship that the United States has with Pakistan, and particularly through the CIA and ISI, that stretches back, 65 years or more, with the U-2 base being in Pakistan, and then Pakistan always playing a very prominent role in CIA covert operations, first in the war in Afghanistan in the 1980s, and then again when we went back to war in Afghanistan after 2001. So there, and without understanding that India all along had sought a relationship with the then Soviet Union. They wanted to have friendly relations with the West, but they had a strategic relationship with the Soviet Union. Or Trump's crack the other day about all the blood and sacrifice the United States shed in World War II to defeat the Japanese. Again, in World War II, the facts are this: that the World War II started for China in 1938, when the Japanese started attacking, and the United States did not do a damn thing to speak up, protest what Japan was doing to the Chinese, number one. Number two, 70% of Japanese military forces during World War II were in China.
No.
They were not out in the Pacific. They were in China. So China was fighting 70%, well over 2/3 of the Japanese army. And as a consequence of that, while the U.S. Marines, soldiers, and sailors in the Pacific theater, 110,000 U.S. Military personnel died in the Pacific during from January 1942 until August 1945. The Chinese lost 3.5 million. So obviously the Chinese, their ability to pin down the bulk of the Japanese force in World War II is actually what enabled the United States to prevail. If anything, we should have been thanking the Chinese, not the other way around. But again, it goes back to Trump's ignorance, a lack of curiosity, and he got his knowledge about the Pacific War from watching John Wayne and Sands of Iwo Jima.
No, I would just add that, most Americans, I'm sad to say, are probably in the same boat that Larry's just attributed to Trump.
Yeah.
Now, I will admit that Kuomintang, and it was Chiang Kai-shek and his forces that probably did the most damage to the Japanese, because the Long March people, the people ultimately triumphant in China, would stay away from the battles if they could, because they wanted to conserve their power for the struggle in China. An understandable motivation for a guerrilla group. But still, as Larry said, China did a hell of a lot that caused our war in the Pacific to be a lot easier, just as the Russians did on the Western Front. And Americans need to wake up. It does you no good to really know a patriotic version of history that is a patent lie.
Yeah. And on top of it, again, this gets back into history, but who was supplying China? Who was the major supplier of China to keep them in the game militarily? That was the Soviets, the Russians. So, our failure to understand history, excuse me, and appreciate these relationships with these countries go back, a long ways. And again, we fail to take that into account.
Colonel, we had Kaya Kallas coming out and saying that they feel Russia and China, they feel that they won the World War II. It's somehow amazing that she doesn't know even the history of what has happened, and trying to rewrite or trying to manipulate the history. Who's gonna buy that? Does she have a particular audience that she's targeting?
And who I missed who you were.
Kaya Kallas is European. Kaya Kallas.
Oh, I got
the
it.
European, yeah.
I got it. I was trying to figure out if you were talking about Ursula or.
No, Kaya Kallas.
Well, we all have our myths, and we all have particularly our national myths. And much of America's history is a myth. And that's not so bad as it might sound if you think myths just equate to lying, because everyone has a national myth. Every country, I would vouchsafe, has a national myth of some sort or the other. That myth is what you consult when you have problems, and when you have conscience problems in particular, and when you have security problems, you go back to that myth. It's a very powerful thing in history. But if you contaminate that myth to the point where others are so looking at you as they are now as a pariah whose whole purpose in life is to make their life miserable, or even to kill them through sanctions or military action, like that happened on the high seas against every freaking part of international law that still exists, recently off Venezuela, then your myth begins to be contaminated. And the more your myth is based on lies, and myth and lies are not the same thing, but the more that your national myth is based on lies, and other people intuit or know that from their own research and study, they're not stupid in other countries. Invariably, they're smarter than we are these days. Then the worse you are off in terms of your position in the world vis-a-vis them, and ultimately vis-a-vis yourself. Dan Grazier's got a piece out right now that I agree with 100%. 15 years ago, I would not have said that. He's a Stimson, I think. And his piece argues that China has no interest in using force against Taiwan. And we're the ones saying that that's the case.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And I wouldn't have said that 10 or 15 years ago when I was wargaming that scenario virtually every year with all the joint war colleges. The reason is simple. China is winning. And there's no way they want to jeopardize that victory with a war that might bring on what I think SCO was in part about, might bring on the dying empire's use of nuclear weapons, because nobody wins that. Not the Chinese, probably not the world. So they do not want a war. It's kind of like Putin, but it's a different set of circumstances. He's winning. He's winning. He doesn't want a ceasefire. He wants to complete the job of destroying the Ukrainian military's ability to wage war. Ever. He wants that done. And he wants the Nazis gone and a few other things too. China's in that same kind of boat. It's not waging a war unless you consider the economic situation a war. But it is winning. And why do you want to go to war over Taiwan when you're winning? Because inevitably, as Sun Tzu had said, Taiwan will be a material part of China.
Larry, what can we learn from Washington? In my opinion, there has to be some sort of huge discussions about what would be the future of the United States. How do they want the United States to be in the near future? Are they going to continue with this sort of political and military conflicts with Russia, China, Iran, and now Venezuela and what's going on? Many people are arguing that the case of Venezuela is some sort of false flag and some sort of distraction from what's going on with Epstein files. But you're taking that.
I admire your optimism that you believe that somebody's thinking about the future and having a strategic thought. I don't see any presence of any strategic understanding, and it is very much a reactive system that is responding to what's oftentimes in the news side. Well, you've got two things. You do have this bureaucracy, this deep state, and it's not just confined to the government, because they're connected to the defense industry, they're connected to the media, but they all, they're sort of pursuing, they've got their own objectives. Now, Trump's not consulted on that, I'm sure, and it doesn't matter who's president. It's just sort of rolling forward. Again, I'm still not sure, though, it's a strategic vision, because if we're thinking from a standpoint of strategy, we would have a defense industry that was actually producing relevant weaponry, systems that were not terribly expensive and not almost impossible to replace. I think there is this hardcore that is they're going to break up Russia. That's goal number one, and then take out China after that. That's sort of it. Now, we've got sort of some interesting, I'll call it circumstantial evidence of that. Do you know how large the U.S. Embassy is in Armenia? Armenia is a pissant little country. I mean, 2.8 million people. No offense to Armenians, okay? But like Georgia's less than 3 million. So Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Armenia has the largest embassy per capita in the world. In other words, what I mean by that, the number of U.S. diplomats that are at that embassy is 14.3 per 100,000 of population in Armenia. What, 400? Are you kidding me? And yet you got to say, well, what are they doing? Well, I guarantee you, and this is not based upon any classified information I've ever received, but just analytically looking at it, I guarantee you there's a CIA presence there. And one of their tasks and mission is to target Russia, and the other is to target Iran. That's why you've got that huge embassy with this many Americans. So it comes back that instead of Trump coming in and really setting the tone of what the foreign policy is going to be, it's being set for him in a lot of these crucial areas. And go back and ask yourself, when did the conventional wisdom in the United States suddenly turn and become so anti-Chinese? Because it wasn't that way 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But, somewhere between George W. Bush and Barack Obama, all of a sudden it became, we got to stop China, and China's trying to take Taiwan. And there was, after Tiananmen Square back in, was that 90, 91? I remember the reaction in America at the time was, sort of shocked, but that didn't even turn it into what it is now with this routine commentary about, you're going to go to war with China, and we're going to, China's an enemy. There's absolutely, the entire attitude has become one of confrontation towards China. So that doesn't show me any kind of strategic thinking.